As I had posted earlier this week, I wanted to touch a little bit on the topic of duty to report as it plays out in the child welfare space. I will say that I'm speaking specifically for Ontario, Ottawa, because that is my sphere of experience. So I actually always thought everybody knew about duty to report, but as in my line of work, I started to realize that it's not actually known by everybody. So first I wanted to define what it is, which it is a legal and ethical requirement to notify a child protection agency if you have reasonable grounds to believe that a child is in need of protection. I will really stress the reasonable grounds part because it will play into what I want to touch on later. So it's pretty much the foundation of the entire child welfare system. Of course, there's no confidentiality where this is coming in. So if you've signed a confidentiality agreement, but there is grounds to think that the child is at risk of some type of harm, confidentiality goes out the window. Who is required to report? Anybody with a voice, a professional, a parent, a healthcare provider, a teacher, a social worker, an educator. So a lot of people get surprised when, child welfare turns up at their door and they're wondering who called you. It could be anybody. It could be your neighbor who hates you for stomping a little too loud on the floors. It could be your kid's teacher, doctor, psychiatrist, your grandma, your husband, your wife, your child, anybody. So now that we've gotten the who and the what out of the way, what should be reported? Of course, any type of physical harm, any type of emotional abuse, any type of sexual abuse, and any type of neglect, and any type of exposure to partner violence. So now this only does not include physical violence, but it also has come to include emotional harm from children experiencing a lot of verbal, witnessing parents argue, not like the normal amount, but the kind that goes into like a very unhealthy, space where there's cursing, breaking things, all that type of stuff. This has to be immediate and it cannot delay. And another thing I found in my research, which I found quite interesting, is it has to be done directly by the person who observed the situation. So this is interesting because there's some spaces where, for instance, schools, if a teacher hears something in class, they would probably have to go tell a principal before they get on a phone, call an agency. However, sometimes I've noticed that's not even across the boards. There's been some schools where that's their practice. Whoever hears the thing tells the principal makes the call. There's been some instances where the teacher themselves will call the agency, and sometimes without the knowledge of the principal. So I'm curious around if there's some type of uniform steps to be taken when it comes to reporting